When you look at the skyline of New York City, it is easy to see a blank canvas, a place where architects with massive budgets and massive egos competed to build the tallest, most expressive structures possible. But that impression ignores the reality of the ground below. Manhattan is an island, a finite, narrow strip of rock that had to absorb an exploding population. To manage that extreme density, city officials, engineers, and natural forces imposed a series of strict physical boundaries, civic laws, and reactions to historic disasters. Every spire and setback is the result of a negotiation between artistic vision and a rigid cage of constraints that left developers with no other choice but to build up and in. The earliest attempt to control this island was the Commissioner's Plan of 1811. Planners overlaid a strict orthogonal grid of avenues and intersecting streets onto Manhattan. The goal was to make real estate development ruthlessly efficient by dividing the land into predictable, easily sold rectangles. Once those lots were drawn, developers quickly filled them with wood frame houses. Then, in 1835, a massive fire leveled blocks of the city. In response, officials severely restricted the use of highly flammable wood in new construction. Builders had to adapt, turning to materials that could survive an inferno. They floated brick and stone down the Hudson River and along the Atlantic seaboard, leaning heavily on a specific type of sandstone known as Connecticut brownstone. The elegant, uniform rows of stone townhouses that define New York's oldest residential neighborhoods are the direct result of a desperate response to a fiery disaster. As the population spilled past the grid, the city hit its natural water boundaries. Connecting Manhattan to boroughs like Brooklyn required feats of structural engineering, forcing laborers to work suspended on steel cables high over the East River. While the city pushed horizontally across bridges, it was also forced to solve a problem building up on the rooftops, one that left thousands of iconic cedar tanks perched on the skyline. In the 19th century, buildings grew taller than 6 stories. Pumping water to upper floors required extremely high pressures, which would burst underground pipes. To protect infrastructure, the city mandated tall buildings install their own roof-mounted water towers to rely on gravity. A purely utilitarian plumbing constraint created an indelible architectural signature that remained scattered across the city. By the early 1900s, developers were pushing buildings straight up from their lot lines. Structures like the 1915 Equitable Building rose vertically for 40 stories, plunging the streets below into dark, sunless canyons. Fearing a city of perpetual shadow, officials passed the 1916 zoning resolution. New buildings had to step inward at specific angles to let sunlight reach the pavement. Architects maximizing square footage were forced to adopt a stepped, tapered design, hugging those invisible boundaries. Masterpieces like the Chrysler Building and the Empire State Building are the artistic decoration of this legally mandated wedding cake frame. The world's most recognizable skyscraper silhouettes were born from a municipal sunlight mandate. As developers modernized the city, older structures became targets for demolition. In 1963, the original Pennsylvania Station, a Beaux-Arts masterpiece, was torn down to make way for a new Madison Square Garden and commercial office complex. The loss of Penn Station triggered widespread public outrage. Historians and citizens characterized the demolition as an act of civic vandalism. That outrage led directly to the creation of the Landmarks Preservation Commission in 1965. This local law legally froze over 1,000 historic structures in time, protecting the city's cultural heritage from the wrecking ball. Anger over erased history created a powerful legal constraint, forcing future generations of architects to build around rather than over the city's past. Looking at the 21st century skyline, modern architects face a new set of stringent constraints. Today, environmental regulations dictate how buildings interact with the climate, enforcing rigorous standards for sustainable and green design. The Hearst Tower illustrates this era perfectly. A high-performing, energy-efficient triangular glass facade rests directly on top of the preserved 1920s masonry base, complying with both modern environmental rules and historic preservation laws. From the 1811 GRIB to the current green building codes, New York City is a physical record of humans surviving and adapting to a crowded, highly regulated island. The city's silhouette is not a product of unlimited imagination, but a physical map of the uncompromising rules that forced it into being.